Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Plaksin, and I'm so happy to welcome to our studio international journalist and author Randa Handler. Now, Randa's a writer of children's books that are kind of whimsical as well as fun, but they also have a very interesting, if you want to call it, hidden agenda. What they try to do is relay a message of diversity by featuring multicultural characters with plenty of different backgrounds as well as personalities. Now, my favorite is Cubby Blue and his dog, Dot. Now, this series of books is all about tiny creatures from Antarctica who really have no clue about us, and they befriend three multiracial 8-year-old boys. Cubby is really a great way to help kids embrace their differences and deal with struggles. Now, one of the boys in the series actually stutters, and they all help him through it. Now, Randa's books indirectly touch on several different issues and can be used to open dialogues with kids about topics such as racism, climate change, recycling, protecting wildlife, and even lessening our carbon footprint on a global basis. So you can imagine I'm not really surprised that a few of her books have actually found their way into classrooms. Well, Randa, it's a pleasure to have you on the program today. And I'd love, as would our listeners, I'm sure, I'd kind of like to learn what you're about and how you were able to find your life's purpose.
Thank you, Michael. I'm happy to be here.
Pleasure to have you. And let me start with a really easy question. How did you get into writing and why?
I guess everything I had done career-wise ultimately led me to writing, from a master's in journalism at SU to even my first job at UN. And and from there, like being an international journalist and for a few years as a publicist. I guess even as a publicist, through that, I met my first client who I published years later as an author. And
so you started writing your first reader books?
Exactly. And then that's where I ended up starting to write my own children's books.
Gotcha. Now, why first readers books and instead not a regular picture book or chapter book, something like that?
Well, against my better judgment and, against what you've been always told by the publishing industry, I decided to go beyond that 1,000 word count and then, and go closer to the chapter books count. But I still wanted pictures because I think visuals are essentials to drive that point home of what you're trying to convey. And I still think kids, between the age of 5 to 9, still want to see visuals, even though they're learning how to read.
I got it. Now, Timmy, why was it so important for the main characters to be so different than other characters in books?
Well, see, children are also innocent at birth. They don't have a notion of what's good or bad, and the formative years are crucial. Our society is so multiracial and multicultural, and we definitely need to see ourselves as part of that society to be comfortable in it. And having illustrations like really, even though in early readers, drive that point home.
I understand. Well, let me ask you a question about your personal idea for advice, and what kind of advice do you have for people who want to get into writing?
I get that question a lot. I think writing is difficult, and you need discipline. You have to put in the time and actually research.
And as far as research, please give me a little more information on that.
Well, every topic needs to be researched first. From what's being said about it to what's being debated. Do you agree with it? Do you disagree with it? Try and see if your premise fills a void, and then try and write about what you know best, what is familiar to you, and even if it's fiction. Even when you're writing fiction, the surroundings, the characters, and what they should be doing or not be doing should be familiar. For example, you cannot write about being a lawyer or a doctor if you're not familiar with their day-to-day lives. You have to convey in a way that would be believable, and that also includes children's books.
I understand. So what do you think are the biggest misconceptions out there about writing children's books?
Well, I mean, that's an easy answer. Everybody thinks that they have the next Harry Potter, and then their book is going to be a bestseller.
Understood. But what do you think is the best way to launch a first book?
Well, planning is essential. If you know that it's an uphill climb, you need to just be ready for whatever comes your way. To be a writer, that is what gives you the most satisfaction. If being a writer is like what you really want to do and gives you the most satisfaction, by all means, you should go for it. And then the new digital age gives plenty of opportunities to do just that. You no longer have to send like tons of letters to countless publishers and wait for one rejection after the other. You can start small and even self-publish. Many authors started that way and found their readership. It is possible. But even when you do that, you still have to follow the publishing formula. You cannot just put out their manuscript that is not polished with characters that are not developed. That goes also for children's books.
What gave you the urge or the feeling to want to write?
I mean, I think even as a child, I like to escape into different realities through books. I remember my mom coming into my bedroom late at night and catching me like reading in bed and pulling books out of my hands and ordering me to sleep. I guess first came the reading bug and then was followed by the writing bug, I would say.
I got you. 2 bugs in a row. What inspired you to create children's books and really include in them multiracial characters?
Well, I would say, the United Nations and working there, and then followed by being an international journalist and meeting so many different people from so many different cultures. And also, I remember like visiting a school in a Mideastern country. I'm not going to say which one right now, but anyway, where an elementary school teacher was like teaching her students, in a very misguided way, that like how bad the life is in America. And I remember thinking, what an awful thing to say, but I couldn't, and molding young minds that way. But I couldn't say anything because I was a guest. So I guess that must have planted the seed in my mind. And the first thing I remember writing was like a treatment idea for Cubby Blue, the tiny character that you mentioned at the top of your show, from Antarctica and befriending the 3 boys from different cultures. But then years later, I mean, I shelved the idea of writing because I became a publicist and I published other people first, including a series of educational children's books and the self-empowering books of rights activist Calvin Helene.
So tell me, what authors do you like to read? And what books do you feel had the most influence on your writing style?
Well, that's easy. Looking back, I remember very well the authors that influenced me as a kid. I read a lot of books as a child and remember being so taken by the visuals in those early years. To this day, I remember staring at the sparse illustration of a French, I think she's French, writer by the name of Comtesse de Ségur and her chapter books, but, there were only a couple of illustrations per book. And then, of course, my favorite is The Little Prince by Saint-Exupéry. And then, as a grown-up, I used to be intrigued by philosophies, weird philosophies in writings like Kafka.
Very interesting. But why then did you focus on children's books?
Why children's books? Well, a young mind is influenced early on, and children's books, to me, are tools. I saw a need for diversity in mainstream children's books. I tried to populate my books with fun characters, diverse and representative of different cultures, and believe that you need to expose children to society's diversity in a loving way, then children would find it easier to embrace others who are different. They would be happier as they grow older and create in the process a more, I believe, harmonious society. A couple of years ago, there was like a hashtag that went viral, "We need diverse books," and it was retweeted by everybody from, in the major media, from like the New York Times to CNN to NBC to PBS. And I remember thinking, well, they didn't fall atop my books yet.
Well, one of the things that makes it interesting is you've illustrated your own books, and of course that's very uncommon, and the illustrations are really very vivid and very colorful. What motivated you to do that, and what made you to decide on reaching the target age of early readers in the 5 to 9 age bracket?
Actually, I didn't set out to do the illustrations myself. I started by sketching the illustrations as templates for other illustrators to do. But then I started finding that I was really enjoying the illustration process, the scenes, the little personalities, the colors. They put me in a great mood, and many find, I guess, the illustrations a little vivid and exuberant. I didn't think I would be doing the illustrations when I started out, but I'm glad I did. Early readers are usually chapter books without illustrations, but because of the diverse characters in my books, I wanted to keep them as picture books. And my books do still follow the guidelines of the 32 pages, even though they are more wordy than actual picture books. Anything that lets young minds escape and visualize seems to me a good thing.
That sounds good. Now, why do you think that writing books that have diversity in them can help fight racism?
I believe that if you learn early to be comfortable with what or who seems different, you will embrace it. Children are not born racist. They don't know what it means for a very long time. Racism and hate are learned behavior. Children books that reflect our society are the tools to open any dialogue. Why not use them to talk about differences and even racial injustices? I was so happy when some parent and educator used Cubby Blue and his dog to talk diversity. One educator used a blue cup and a cutout of the character in a cup to open dialogue about differences. It impressed me so much that I animated a short video with Cubby Blue prototype dolls going to school. A couple of teacher sites have posted the video online. Cubby Blue and his friends are great to talk diversity, as in addition to Cubby Blue's small size and color and his dog being so tiny and different, the children themselves being different too. For me, and I'm happy to feel that like teachers and educators and parents, find them useful to talk diversity.
I think that's really great. Let me ask you, if you, with all the books that you've done, what book of yours would you suggest first to a parent?
Well, they all have a special place in my heart, but Cubby Blue would be the one that I would suggest first. I guess I relate to Cubby Blue the most, is what I call a global citizen and doesn't see the negative in any situation. The Cubby Blue and his dog series follow, like we were saying, the three multiracial 8-year-olds with varied backgrounds. And then they, being supervised visitors for Antarctica, they also share about their own world. So even though 3 inches tall and appearing vulnerable, like for instance, Cubby Blue has supernatural power, has an uncanny ability to see things in a positive light. I tried to make the character appeal to both little girls and little boys. I thought readers or listeners will enjoy the storylines of discovery with friends, whether they are similar to them, with small, big problems, and also be vehicles to talk about struggles that they might be facing.
Kind of while you put that within an exciting and entertainment story, so you mix it all together, right?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Well, I tried.
And I think you've done a great job of it. Which book do you think was the hardest to write?
By far, The Boy Who Spoke to God. Talking religion, I remember being asked, why would you do that? Well, I am not really talking religion with that book, but again, embracing the diversity of beliefs, and I'm not preaching one religion over another.
So then tell me, why did you decide, and you said you didn't try to tackle religion, but you're talking about religion, and why did you decide to do that in a children's book?
Well, actually, that was super hard. My mission being to talk about differences, I kept thinking to myself, how can I not talk about different beliefs? So as a child, I was exposed to many cultures, and as my friends had many different religions. None of these differences mattered as we were kids, and I was trying to convey this in a book as the way I grew up. Because, for instance, I went to a French Catholic parochial school, but my friends were Muslim and Jewish. I remember how intrigued I was by their different traditions. I couldn't understand why my Jewish friends couldn't turn the lights on Saturdays, and I found that so intriguing. Interestingly, when I worked at UN, the two people who helped me the most career-wise happened to have been Jewish and Muslim from two different continents, an American and an Arab.
Very interesting. Now, let me ask you something else. And I'm supposing that it could be, but do you believe that religious tolerance is teachable?
Actually, 100%. I wish for every child to experience exotic cultures and beliefs. And nothing expands a young mind better. The Boy Who Spoke to God is just a small attempt at opening a dialogue.
Did you always dream about being published?
Well, actually, not really. I always wondered whether the people who answered this question with a yes, whether they were really bitten by the writing bug or not. I write because I feel that I have to say something, and I don't really care if anyone likes it or reads it. Just like an artist needs to express himself, herself, painting or creating music, creative people need an outlet, and sometimes they do it for an audience of one. I never kept a journal, but I don't really write to be read. When you forget to eat and forget to drink because you are so consumed with what you're doing, you will know that you are on the right path.
I see. So what drives you to select a certain topic as opposed to another one? What drives you to choose this type of topic or idea?
Well, something gets my attention, whether it's an article or a news segment, and it triggers a thought, and then that thought becomes a book idea because of that urge to share something. The urge usually is a need to explain something that I feel is true within me, and I begin formulating a way to do it via a character or a storyline.
So explain to me a little more in detail, what's your writing routine like? Do you draft an idea? Do you set a deadline for yourself? What's your strategy?
I usually just jump right into it and don't stop until that first draft is done. But usually the idea has been formulated in my head with lead characters and plot lines. Some writers do have routines and disciplines that they follow, and I actually do envy them. I wish I had the structure of going to a desk and putting in a couple hours of writing on a regular basis, but I actually don't. Some writers have idea books even and refer to them as they are musing. I don't, but I do see the benefit to structures. Some even keep notes of dialogue, scenes, and even imagery to use. I don't, but maybe I should. To me, writing for the sake of writing is not that good. I prefer writing when that urge hits me. I say, like everything else, your muse needs to rest too.
I understand. I've heard this, and I want to ask this question about you. Is it true that writers are usually perceived or seen as loners?
Well, I tend to agree with that. I have always been a little bit of a loner. I'd say I like my own company. And I never seem to get bored. I'm always launching into one project or another. But to me, a true writer needs the quiet time to process things. You cannot write and create that perfect fantasy realm in the midst of chaos and noise. I do like my alone time, but enjoy being social too.
So, do you see any of your books being made into movies?
course. I think every writer probably does. Well, unless it's nonfiction. I would love to see one of them make it to the screen. I actually wrote the screenplay to Cubby Blue, and it was optioned a couple of times, but I still did not get that lucky yet.
Well, there's always the future, and there's always hope for that to happen. Let me ask you another question from you. What's more important in writing early readers? Is it chapter books, plot, or characters?
Well, I think a plot is as important as characters. When they are fully illustrated in your mind, the dialogue and the scenes flow. Everything will materialize in front of your eyes, which will attract your reader. Often a character will show me the way to the story, and sometimes an event will trigger a story plot in my head. For example, right now I have two cats that used to be best friends, brother and sisters, and they're like suddenly enemies, fighting all the time. So one lives upstairs, one lives downstairs, and I'm waiting for a resolution to this problem for it to become a story.
So you never know where the next idea will come from.
Yes, this one will come from home. Yeah.
So are you telling me that writers shouldn't try to self-publish?
Well, not at all. I'm happy with the self-publishing industry, and I'm happy with what it offers new writers as a platform. Many famous writers started there. I would recommend, though, that which way you publish, you follow a good publishing rule that doesn't change. The formula is the same. A good book is edited, vetted, with plot lines, and developed characters, no matter the audience.
Is it really hard to earn a living as a writer?
Well, there are many ways to get your feet wet as a writer. You can start small and build. I have had my share of rejections, and I'm sure a new writer will get them too. That is a tough aspect of a writer's life. I can imagine the same with creative fields, from writing to painting to acting to music creating. You have to let the rejection slide off your shoulders. You need to believe in yourself first and then go for it. I spent many years as a journalist and as a publicist before becoming a full-time writer and publisher. You can work part-time and support your writing until you feel comfortable with it as a livelihood. The best advice I ever got was to treat my writing as a hobby until it becomes a life's purpose. The more you write and the more you put stuff out there, whether for spec or for hire, the more you'll be good at it. So my advice is to keep at it and not be discouraged by any rejections. Reach out to any local publications first and get your feet wet and build on that. The internet gives you plenty of platforms too, with blogs and sites similar to your genre of writing, where you can offer a guest post or two.
I wanted to ask you, how do you think that one writer can help another writer?
Well, I mean, the most important thing is feedback, and that could be one of the first things that a writer could help another writer with, and reviews. Many of us are afraid to give it, and especially to receive it. But being in the writing community can be a good supporting system. Unpleasant advice or criticism can be a blessing too, especially if it's genuinely given. As a writer, you are too close to your characters and plot to see whether a scene fits or not. That's why I totally believe in editors and feedback. It is a way to stay on target. When your characters are developed well, you would immediately know whether the feedback has merit or not. It is a good way to polish and improve the story. Of course, I'm talking about constructive feedback, not negative trolling feedback that seems to mushroom on the internet. For example, as a publisher, I would never think of releasing a book without an editor's pass. She has asked many authors to pull things out of dialogue or highlighted ideas that improved an author's book and tied it all together at times. And that should testify to the importance of feedback, because some editors have stayed friends with their authors for years.
I think that's a great response. What I want to do is kind of ask you now, when you look at your family of books, they really seem to always have teaching morals in them. And in addition, of course, diversity as well as tolerance. Is that a targeted effort?
Well, I would say yeah. I spend a while before deciding on a premise, going over the pros and the cons. Has the subject matter been tackled before? How often? What's the audience like? The diversity angle is a must, as that's why I launched into writing children's books. But I always like to include a subplot and at least one new character per book that's dealing or struggling with some kind of an issue that children, like, ages 5 to 9, my target audience, is most likely struggling with.
Now, one of the things that I did notice that in your new book, I See You, book number 3 in the Cubby Blue series, that in addition to the diverse multicultural characters and their own struggles, that's from Brian's stuttering to Derek's impulsiveness, they meet a character named Leo, and they help him discover his self-worth and kind of stand up against bullying.
Yep, that's it.
Cool.
You're right.
Thank you. And what I'd like to do right now as we're closing in on the end, I want to kind of honor the Actors Studio and do this where I give you a series of rapid fire questions. I'll make it as easy as possible, and I'm guessing you know the answers to all of them. So my first one is, what's your favorite word?
I'd say wonderful.
What sound or noise do you really love?
Ocean.
What's your favorite curse word?
Oh, I went to Catholic school. I don't think I can share that.
Not a problem. I have several of my own. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Lawyer.
If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you finally arrive at the pearly gates?
That's a really good question. Considering I attempted to talk about God in one of my books, I guess it would be nice if I get there and he says, "Good attempt, Randa." I would change a few things, though. I remember one of the weirdest ones that were asked. I always chuckled at this one and waited to see what the actor's answer would be. On a scale of 1 to 10, how weird are you? Well, I'd say 9. And anytime somebody tells me not to try something and it's against the odds, it makes me always try harder. So that'll make me weird,
cool.
Right?
What are you not very good at?
I used to get that question a lot when I would be interviewed for jobs. And I always wondered whether people really tell the truth or not about that. Now that I am not looking for a job, a few do come to mind.
Really? What?
For instance, I hate public speaking. It's funny for a publicist, right? I remember one time a client and I were at a sold-out appearance, and I said to him, "Do not call me to the podium, please." He thought I was kidding, and of course he did. And it was horrible. For some reason, a really heavy French accent took over me, and I couldn't understand what the heck I was saying. I remember him looking at me and saying, "You were not kidding, were you?"
So let me ask, what do you argue with people about the most?
Well, ghosts, whether they exist or not, peace in the Middle East, life after death, many things come to mind. How about you?
I'm going to go with all the points that you just mentioned.
Oh, really? Well, that's an easy answer.
See? Well, I like to give easy answers. Let me ask you, in the new COVID normal, has the writing muse been more present? And if so, what have been the changes? What have they been like?
Well, I seem to spend tons of time cleaning and in Zoom meetings. As a writer, you kind of live a loner life anyways. But I must admit, quarantining made me write a couple of new books. Funny, right?
Well, that'll be interesting, and it'll be great to see them. Well, our time's just about up, and I'm sure that our listeners want to know more, and they want to get Randa's books. Now, that's the easiest thing to remember, as you really don't need to write anything down. First of all, there's the Randa Handler website. That's R-A-N-D-A Handler website. An author page at Amazon, as well as at Barnes & Noble, and a website for Ravencrest Publishing. Now, to repeat, folks, you can get Randa's early reader children's books wherever books are sold. You can just go ahead and Google her name, Randa Handler. That's R-A-N-D-A Handler, Randa Handler, or Cubby Blue and his dog Dot. Cubby is Cubbie, so it's Cubby Blue and his dog, Dot. Now, children's book series, and you'll see a ton of articles that'll pop up with links as well as reviews, even some lesson plans. Now, funny enough, she even, and you had talked about this, even created an animated video of Cubby Blue and his dog Dot going to school using the prototypes of the characters. It's hilarious, and if you get the opportunity, I highly recommend you see it. It's really amazing. It's just the best.
Thank you, Michael, for this opportunity to be on your show and to share with your listeners some ideas and tips about writing. And who knows, maybe I inspire somebody to get on and start writing.
That'll be great. This has been Michael Plaksin. Thank you so much, Randa Handler, for being with me today. We'll have more soon. Bye-bye.